Good morning and welcome to 4Media's second Q&A live stream for these strange times we're living through. We hope you're all keeping safe and well. As many of you know, we normally hold our regular breakfast meet briefings at our offices in Farringdon, but of course that's impossible at the moment. So now it's more important than ever for us to stick together as an industry, and at 4Media we thought we'd try and do our bit to help. So we plan to hold one of these live stream Q&A sessions every week if we possibly can, each time with a leading light from a section of the UK media, from print, broadcast, online. Last week, over 300 people tuned in live to watch our 4Media chat with Daniel Jones of The Sun, and another 1,700 have watched it since. So huge numbers of you. So thanks ever so much for joining us. As an update on our business, although we're obviously all now working from home, just as you are, we're still launching surveys as normal. We're doing broadcast interviews remotely as usual, and live streaming is more important now than ever. So if you need our advice or help in any way, then please do get in touch. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Edwards, the head of news at 4Media. I'm the former night editor of The Sun newspaper with a rather long lifetime of Fleet Street experience under my belt. Between me and my team and Sam Dibley and his broadcast team, we have a pretty comprehensive insight into the media, and we're here to help if we can. But today we're very lucky to have an award-winning journalist you all undoubtedly recognise from your TV screens. David Blackmore is a producer and a reporter on ITV's This Morning, as well as being a multimedia writer and radio presenter. He'll be able to give us a unique insight into what's happening with TV news and magazine programming right now. So lots of you have already sent questions in that I'll put to David on your behalf, and there's a facility for you to send live questions, which should appear down the side of your screen. I'm not sure which side. I'll get through as many of those as I can in the 30 minutes that we've got together. So now, fingers crossed, my face will fade away and we can say good morning in Norfolk to David Blackmore.
Morning, Alan, and morning, everyone. Yeah, normally people will see me different parts of the world, but today you get to see my fine collection of notepads that I seem to have collected over the years. I think that's just an old habit of being a newsprint journalist and always wanting to make sure that I've got a notepad to hand.
Indeed, the old journalist trick as well, never throw your notebooks away. So first question we have, let's get cracking straight away. And I think we can tell part of the answer to this from where you're talking to us now. But how has Corona affected the way that you're working?
Oh, well, it's had a huge impact across the industry as well. Everyone is working from home unless it's absolutely essential that they're in. So very much across TV, you've got skeleton crews that are operating there. And as you can see from this morning with Phil and Holly this week, they've been having 2 meters apart distances. Ruth Lehman are next to each other because they're in the same household, so therefore they can. But yeah, essentially it's having to think about different ways for This Morning to put on our show. And you'll probably see, if anyone's been watching Good Morning Britain, Lorraine, or Loose Women before it went off air, and same with This Morning, is the amount of Skype calls and FaceTimes we're doing. Not so long ago, oh no, we don't want to do Skype or FaceTime because the signal's always bad and it's not going to work. But in these unprecedented times, we've had to think creatively, and we've had to use Skype or FaceTime because the cost of getting the camera to everyone isn't always going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way you work. I mean, when was the last time you were actually out on a job?
The last time I was out on the job actually was, can you remember the Tenerife hotel that had been locked down after this virus had suddenly come from Asia and it spread into Europe, and suddenly there was a hotel on lockdown. But, is it going to get to the UK, or we're not sure about that? And suddenly, yeah, a few weeks on, here we are. So that was the last job I was out on. And from that moment, it's really been a case of watching coronavirus creep further and further into the UK. And then leading us to the situation that we're in now, where we're all having to work remotely.
Yeah, that seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? So how much coronavirus content would you say is making This Morning now? How much, what kind of percentage is virus related?
I think now it's a huge amount of content. I think what we've done is we've essentially taken coronavirus as a bit of like sort of an onion, and we've sort of peeled off all the different layers, all the different things that we can think of that's going to impact our viewers. And I think that is the one key message I want to try and get across today, is that we are going to reach a saturation point where we're not going to be doing as much coronavirus as certainly as the curve starts to flatten and we start to get on top of this and the tide seems to be turning. But at the moment, you know, we've got Alice Beer doing stuff every single day talking about consumer items. So from a This Morning point of view, there's probably not a good idea to pitch a consumer champion, because we've already got our consumer champion. But then we've got kind of fashion, we've got demos, we've got cookery. All of those at the moment have coronavirus steers, and probably will do over the next week. And I think anyone who, well, you won't be watching the show now because you're watching me, hopefully. But the first half hour of most of today's shows now have been latest headlines from coronavirus. What are the other things that people are doing? So last night we had the people clapping their hands. We've also got the NHS volunteer army. So we are, I guess it's quite similar to perhaps how other TV looks at Brexit, sort of peeling away all those different elements of it. You know, very much I feel like across the industry, they're looking at every single avenue that they can to have a new lease of life with the coronavirus, rather than trampling on the same stuff all the time. It's just looking at different ways to tackle the same story.
But presumably there's an appetite still for other non-coronavirus stories. Is there any guidelines you could give people as to the sort of stories they would be? Do they all have to be light and fluffy to actually make it?
I think at the moment, from a This Morning point of view, I think we want to be able to offer our viewers something that is going to be of light relief. So for us, you know, especially spending so much time talking about coronavirus, we don't want to be spending too much time talking about another hard issue. It'd be interesting to see if there are going to be any government announcements that they're going to try and sort of push sort of under the radar during this crisis, because they know perhaps it won't get as much pickup. If there's something like that happens, which it probably be unlikely, but if something that does happen and it's going to impact, you know, what you think is going to be This Morning viewers, then I would definitely recommend that people get in touch about that. And I think when you look at Good Morning Britain, I think, you know, they're going from 6 till 10 o'clock now, and how long that will be, I'm not sure. So there is definitely possibility there to get other issues that are potentially making the headlines. I mean, I went through the papers at the weekend, last weekend just gone, and I think on both days, the stories that we would consider doing, I think there are about 4 in Saturday's papers and maybe 5 or 6 in Sunday's papers, whereas usually there's kind of 30, 35. So it probably just show you just the level of reactivity there is on our part into sort of what the newspapers are talking about, but also us thinking creatively with our talents and seeing what coronavirus items we can have from there.
So I've got a question in here. What are the type of human interest stories that you think are resonating with audiences at the moment? Maybe you can think of a couple of examples, either coronavirus related, you know, human interest, or non-coronavirus.
It's an interesting one with the coronavirus ones, because I think that was one of the layers that most media have kind of been and done with now. It needs to be next level human interest, generosity when it comes to coronavirus at the moment. But I still think from a human interest point of view, separate from coronavirus, there is still a desire to hear those stories, those inspirational stories. The only thing you're going to find is that they are going to be fewer slots available. So that's why it's really important that when you're pitching these stories, that you are pushing hard and you're pushing with confidence as well. Because if you get a phone call to produce that and someone sounds really confident and are really selling it to you, that is going to give you confidence that when you go into your meetings, that you're going to be able to best place to book that human interest story on the show.
Oh, great. So a couple of comments that run on from that is, you know, what kind of stories and packages and supporting materials are you looking for? You know, like videos, infographics, case studies and things.
What do you mean when it comes from coronavirus, Alan, or non-coronavirus?
No, I think just generally, and possibly more outside coronavirus, I would imagine.
Well,
What kind
I'll
of...
just tackle the coronavirus thing first, in that I think that it's now is a time at this moment to be really reactive. So if something is announced, like it is in the daily briefings every day, and it's one of your clients is going to be the best person to speak about that, you need to be pushing and shouting that from the rooftops to all of the TV and radio industry. You need to be saying, this is the leading person who can talk about this, and here is why. And more importantly, here is what he's got to say. The amount of times I get pitched people, and this is a wide range of things, this is a general thing, that say, oh, we've got someone who can talk about this, but we get pitched so many people to talk about certain issues. What the TV and radio industry, they want to be speaking to the best person. They want to be they want to know exactly what they're going to say before we go in and pitch those meetings. And we do get pitched quite a lot of things sometimes where we don't know what the person's going to be saying. And the first question that we get asked, so what do they say about this then? And we don't know. So make our jobs easier to help get your clients onto the screens by telling us what exactly we are going to hear from the people when they're on the show.
Absolutely great advice, David. There's a quirky one here. Are there any themes that Phil and Holly are particularly keen on, or do they just do as they're told?
Look, when it comes to this morning, especially given the unprecedented overused word at the moment, times that we're in, for that light relief, that thing that people are going to be talking about, you have those water cooler moments where you want to pitch a client that goes to go on a show that's going to be the story that everyone talks about at the water cooler at work. Well, no one's at work at the moment, so it's got to be the stories that people are going to be talking about. The parents when they're having a gin and tonic at night while they're watching the latest news headlines. It's got to be those kind of stories. It's still the same principles. These stories are still getting through. I think people just need to start thinking a bit more creatively, a bit more outside the box. And I don't think that it's going to be happening on Wednesday that you really think that this particular radio show or TV show should be key for their demographic and their viewers. You need to be pushing it really, really hard at the moment because, we are getting absolutely drowned in coronavirus stories and headlines and World Health Organization reports and press conference links. We're getting bombarded with emails. We need your emails to be standing out and shouting at us, particularly in the subject. That is so key, and more so than ever. I think you need to have an understanding of the different shows that you're pitching to, because one size does not fit all. Is this going to work for Good Morning Britain? Is this going to work for BBC Breakfast? Is this going to work for This Morning? And now is probably the better time than any, bearing in mind that I know from some of my friends as well, when it comes to sort of clients, that a lot of them are putting back on making big announcements or doing anything because they don't want to be drowned out by coronavirus. Now is definitely the time to sit back and actually watch how these shows are being outputted, because This Morning hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is every item has got this kind of coronavirus steer on it. So it's definitely worth, from your perspective, to watch the different shows you're pitching to understand what kind of content that they like and they use on a regular basis, and how your clients can fit into that.
Absolutely. So getting them a bit more brand aware now. And do you like to hear about what brands are doing to help the cause? Maybe they're giving things to NHS workers or,
Yeah, absolutely. I think we certainly with sort of Iceland, I have a good relationship with the people who look after Iceland, and we've been talking over the last couple of weeks. And when it got to the point that we felt that the announcement was good enough, then we went for it. It's strange though, because actually I felt previous announcements by Iceland were good enough to come on the show, but it kind of got superseded by other things on that day. However, the day that we actually got Iceland on, it just fitted perfectly because it was on a Monday. We'd had scenes where, you know, there were more shelves that were being completely stripped bare by shoppers. So it kind of fitted in that we'd have an MD from leading supermarkets. So yeah, I am always happy to hear about the brands and what they've got coming up and what's going on now and who potentially we could talk about if something came up. But I would also stress that we don't necessarily always across every single news story that there is out there. So if you talk to me about your brand and you say that your brand spokesperson can talk about X, Y, or Z, and then you see something in the news that is relevant to that, do forward me the link, because it may be that I haven't seen it. And it just reinforces that you're on top of it and you're saying, look, this is something that the person I spoke to can speak to you about. Here's what the story is. And actually, here's what they're going to say about it. Let me know, you know, if you want to book them.
You mentioned Iceland. So are there any PR initiatives that have caught your eye recently? One which sort of added real value to your audience? I'm thinking here both coronavirus and non-coronavirus related.
Well, certainly the clap for carers thing from today's example worked really well because it goes viral online, and I think that's something key as well. It's something that from a PR and from your client's point of view, it's perhaps tapping into those things that are catching on social media. You know, a lot of the TV shows are very reactive to what people are talking about, and they're very reactive to what's in the newspapers as well. So I do think that when you're pitching this stuff, you know, you should be referencing facts that are viral on social media. Here's what you've got on social media. Here's what's trending on there. Here are news stories that are relating to it as well. And I do think, especially when it comes to things like This Morning, how I kind of always like people to pitch is that you watch a This Morning item and you will see at the bottom there's a strap which has, you know, 3 or 4 words summing up essentially what the story is, like coronavirus latest : new tests ? Or something along those lines. And then at the start of the item, you see the presenters read off the auto cue introducing the item. Well, if we could get to a stage that every person that emails me the subject, which could essentially be the strap on This Morning, and their intro is essentially summing up the story, and then going into essentially almost like a Q&A, in terms of this is what the potential question could be, here's what the answer is going to be, what they're going to say. And then further down at the bottom is where we have all of the press releases and all the stuff that the clients I know send to us. But really hone down and fine tune that, because that is going to be what is very much going to stand out for us.
Thanks. Yes, we've got 1 or 2 questions here on timing. So what's a good time of day to pitch to you? How far in advance should people pitch to you? And is there a particular day of the week that's maybe favourable for kind of PR-led stories?
So in terms of time of day, I don't think there is probably, from This Morning, from my personal point of view, there probably isn't a good or a bad time of day. In terms of days of the week, we normally have a forward planning meeting, and it'd be good. And one bit of advice I'd give is, if all the TV shows that you want to be pitching to find out what days of the week they have their planning meetings for This Morning. It's on a Wednesday, so if we were to hear from people on a Monday, and it's for the following week, then we can certainly add it to the mix. We're really trying to fine tune how many stories that we discuss in our forward planning meetings, only because you can end up speaking about loads, 3 or 4 stories for each day, but the news agenda moves on, and by that time those 3 or 4 stories suddenly don't have as much of an impact for whatever reason. So it's really important when people are pitching flows in advance meetings that they're really saying it hard, and they're saying, you know, this is happening on Wednesday, and you know, this is something that is going to be perfect for This Morning viewers. Why? So I would say, Alan, I can't remember the third thing you'd asked, but in terms of time of day, I would probably say
a day of the week. Day of the week, really.
Oh, day of the week, yeah. I mean, Fridays are usually very good because we don't have a show on the Monday. Sorry, we only have the next show on the Monday, so we don't have a week show on the Saturday and Sunday. However, by pitching something on a Friday, it's going to be very unlikely that it will go into Monday's show, because obviously you've got Saturday's papers and Sunday's papers to come. So maybe, certainly, it really does depend. Maybe Thursday, Friday would be the better 2 days. But look, I think when it comes down to sort of the clients and what their expectations are of you, and getting it to in front of This Morning viewers, the one thing I would say is that if you think that it is something that This Morning would show on their screens, you need to be getting in touch with us. You need to be calling us up. You need to be sending us the emails. You need to say stuff. I think if you don't think that it could be good for This Morning, but it would be good for Good Morning Britain, BBC Breakfast, maybe thinking about radio, LBC, because if you think of LBC, all their different shows have different presenters. They all have different likes of what they like as well. So I think at these times, it's definitely more than ever a case of sort of managing client expectation, because they might think it goes on This Morning, but as the experts, this is what they are hiring you to say, is they can say, we want you to pitch us This Morning, but do you think it will go on to This Morning, or do you think it'll be better placed elsewhere? And I definitely would say at these times as well, don't forget your local and regional TV and radio as well, because those are the places that are reflecting on the national agenda of coronavirus, but they don't have as many of the national stories that This Morning and Good Morning Britain could pick up on. And I do think sometimes we don't spend enough time or attention when it comes to forgetting or loving our local and regional TV and radio.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And I also think about pitching to the right actual medium, going to the right program or to the right publication. I think that's where the expertise, actually knowing the landscape, can really help us in these times. But moving on quickly, we've got one or two quite specific questions, which I'm not whether sure if you'll be able to answer or not, but let's go for it. So for social affairs issues, when would you want a spokesperson to be a CEO, or when would you want it to be somebody from a frontline worker on the ground?
This is a difficult one in the sense that it really does depend on which media you're pitching it to, because for This Morning, we really want to hear from those people who are on the front line, who can say, yesterday I spoke to X, Y, and Z, and this is what they told me. However, when you look at, Good Morning Britain or BBC Breakfast or LBC, sometimes they like to have the people that are on the front line, but equally they like to have people who actually are leading the organisation, that are sort of pulling the strings and can be the ones that actually are overseeing it all, so they can perhaps paint a broader picture of what it is. Because sometimes when you speak to someone on the front line, they're only good enough to talk about what they're experiencing day in, day out, and it may not be looking at the broader picture. So for This Morning, I think we're always interested to speak to people who are very much on the front line, because we want to avoid that kind of man in a suit on the sofa. We want to speak to a wide range of people, people particularly who are working on the front line, who can say, yeah, this is what I'm seeing day in, day out, and this is how I think, we could work out doing it. So, but again, I think just picking up what I said earlier on, it's really important that you understand the different TV and radio and what their presenters and what their producers would like to speak to in terms of people and their qualifications and their experience.
Great. Following on from that, what is the appetite now for brand-led sort of people product stories? And is a visual spokesperson or a live call more likely to be included?
Look, there is still a desire to fill gaps on all our shows. So there are still going to be things that we're going to be wanting to talk about. It's just going to be how you're pitching it as well, because just take, I know, from example, another Iceland example, they have a new brand that's coming out that's quirky, that's going to be in supermarket shelves. Well, hopefully they're not in strip there. And it's going to be something that people are going to be talking about. Now, we wouldn't want to necessarily speak to someone on the show about it, but we want them in the studio, so that we can talk about them then. So I wouldn't want to be pitched a spokesperson per se, because like I know that we wouldn't be looking to speak to a spokesperson. When it comes to sort of perhaps things that are more involving people, it's always good to know, as I said before, who this person is. If you've got links that shows them talking to Sky News or BBC or other things that they've done, it's really good to see how people respond in a live interview situation, and also to being sort of asked questions perhaps in a pre-recorded setting as well. And then any links where they're talking about the issue at hand, to like Daily Mail or the local newspapers, and also just, headline. We don't need loads and loads of information of what they're going to say. We just need those really, those 3 or 4 really short, sharp, snappy. This is what your viewers are going to hear from us, and we do want it to be, trying to think of the right word, but we do want it to be hard hitting. We don't want them to shy away. If something is that important that they're going to be coming onto national TV, they need to be expressing themselves in a way that is going to grab the viewer's attention and is going to really make them want to watch and hear what they have to say.
Great. So I'm conscious that we're getting towards the end of our time now. So I'll just a few quick fire sort of specific questions, really. So what changes will we see in the fashion segments on This Morning? Will there be no models eventually?
Good question. There's so many questions when it comes to This Morning that we just don't know the answers to at the moment. We have been previously using people that are in the office because they're in and they're around. And we've been looking at kind of loungewear and things that matter to people today. How this is going to change in the future, I really don't know. Sorry.
And another one we've had is, how interested are you in stories or experts related to well-being and mental health during the crisis?
For This Morning, I would say that we're pretty much well stacked with people who are those experts. If you have somebody who is the world leading expert in this kind of mental health, different sections, again, thinking of the onion, there are obviously different layers to sort of mental and well-being, mental health and well-being. Why are they the best? Why do This Morning really need to hear from them when we have, Deirdre, when we have Emma Kenny, when we have Vanessa Felt, and when we have other people that we can speak to, that we use as kind of that mental health and well-being people on the show. This is the thing that we've been pitched a lot of psychologists, but what I'm not being told is why we need to be having them on the show. We're just being told you can have this person on the show. It's just a way of phrasing emails differently to really, really try and sell something. And I just like to add as well that I was pitched the other day a story which I think could actually work. Not necessarily right now, but in the future. And it was a PR who's representing a service where people can actually outline what they wanted for their funerals. And it was kind of some of the different sort of different ways that people were thinking about doing it. And there was one that had the Star Wars theme. And I'd said to the person, well, what is this Star Wars thing going to be? And they couldn't give me the answers to it. Now, in my mind, you could definitely see on This Morning something like, I would like to be buried in a Millennium Falcon, and having that person coming on the show and talking about why they came to that decision and what planning has gone into it. Because obviously for a lot of people, they don't actually think that far ahead, that they know exactly what they want at their funeral. So it was almost like a half pitch. They had kind of teased us with these different examples of people with sort of quirky funeral plans, but they hadn't gone to the effort of finding out that little bit of detail, that one hook that is going to make me go, wow, I've got someone here who wants to be buried in a Millennium Falcon. And I think that is what's different at the moment, is that when it comes to anything that's being pitched, it definitely needs to be next level. But don't forget that this coronavirus isn't going to be around forever. So if you can, and you can say to your client, look, I don't think it's going to work today, but it might work in a week or 2 weeks. I think you should be looking to build up media and build up a really good pitch so that you can go to This Morning. This is why I think it's going to work for This Morning viewers, and then go to BBC Breakfast and say, this is why it's going to work for BBC Breakfast as well, and what their viewers are. You know, there is information out there that really do explain what the demographics are for each of these shows.
Story or angle pitched to you helped if it's backed up by good research data, do you think?
Yeah, do you know what? I do like to have research data, but it needs to be good research data. We do keep getting pitched stuff where I'm a bit like, well, that's what I'd expect. So if it is going to be research led, again, I don't mind having all the research data below, but at the very top, I need to have short, sharp, snappy. This is why this research is going to really resonate on This Morning.
Great. Is it then just finally, I think I'm conscious that we've just gone over our time now. We need to kind of wrap up. Just do you think is there any particular areas you think people should keep away from when we're pitching stories? I mean, we're aware, aren't we? There's a huge capacity for putting your foot in it out here. I mean, we've looked at Mike Ashley and Wetherspoons have not done themselves any favours this week. Is there anything you would say that we need to be sensitive about, keep away from during this crisis?
I definitely think it's one of those where if you're speaking to people in the office and somebody makes a kind of quib or a joke about the fact that your client wants to put this out during the coronavirus, then I think you need to then take a step back and go, actually, yeah, what impact is this going to have? Like, if this does come out, could this be negative on us? And I think there's, you know, very much, if you do feel that your client is saying to you, push, we need to get this out, and you think, actually, at the moment, this could go against us, this could look bad on us as opposed to positive, then I think it's your duty to say to them, actually, this isn't the reason, this isn't a good time to do it, and explain to them why. And by all means, as I say to a lot of people, contact me. I can tell you know and why it wouldn't get onto This Morning, and to have your feedback for clients, which I know is very important. But sometimes for This Morning, it just isn't the right fit, and sometimes clients have very struggled to understand why that isn't the case for them.
Brilliant, David. Look, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope everyone's found that really interesting. Thanks very much for giving up your time. And it's been a pleasure, and some helpful insights in there. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next week, same time, hopefully with another star name to give us some tips on how we should be doing our business in this crisis. Thanks very much for tuning in, and from all of us at 4Media and from David, bye-bye.